Paxil because it was a waste. It wasn't doing anything. That discouragement makes sense to me. And I don't want to be flip about it. And I don't want to minimize it and say, well, you just got to get motivated. You just got to try harder. Like, don't give up. Yeah, obviously I have that message inside of me for you, right? But I also want to acknowledge it. I want to acknowledge the sorrow. And I want to acknowledge the depth and discouragement that you must have gotten to. And that's part of the great power of mental illness, is that exactly the instrument you need to use to heal yourself is exactly the instrument that's broken.
Right.
And that's so hard. And it's so discouraging whenever you're trying to overcome these things. And depression is part of what you're dealing with. How do you motivate yourself to lean in on the therapeutic relationship, to lean in on your doctor relationship, to try things, to experiment with these medicines, to give it another shot, when it is precisely the motivation and the ability to be optimistic for the future and to believe in anything that is disabled by the condition itself? And so there is a paradox and a catch-22 in this, and you are not alone. There are so many listeners to this show right now who can identify with that feeling of, God, I get that. I get it. I suffer and I've tried to fix it. But even the trying is so exhausting and discouraging. It's hard to lean in on that.
And not even just the trying, but there's, like you said, I mean, there's this paralyzing aspect of it too, especially when you look at panic disorder.
Yes.
So a big part of that is not just having that panic attack, but also the anxiety of having a future panic attack in a situation that you can't control, right? So I've heard a lot of people say similar things like, well, I can't go out in public, or I can't go around in these certain events because what if I have a panic attack? You know, so it's not just having a panic attack. It's like once you have that, then you've got the fear that you're always going to have it and that it's going to come out. So it limits what you're willing to do, right? So then that just feeds into everything else, right? It feeds into the depression, because then it's like, well, I feel immobilized. I feel like I can't do the things I want to do because in fear of having a panic attack. So that immobilization then feeds into the depression.
Yeah.
It's just
and that's the great monster of it, right? Is that all of these things feed themselves. It's like a hydra, a multi-headed problem. And that's why alpaca, I'm going to start with something that you probably wouldn't have expected. You probably would have expected that we're going to be lecturing and tell you, well, here's what you need to do. Get out there and do some push-ups. And I'm sure Nick wants to say the push-ups thing.
Well, we should all do push-ups.
We should all be doing push-ups, Jim. But I do want to come alongside you and say this. When I look at this, the first thing I see is not just the challenges that you're facing. I have got to tip my hat to you, my friend, because you are trying things. This letter is riddled with attempts. I have tried medication. I have tried being social. I have tried doing therapy. I am writing into your show.
She did the meetup groups.
She did the meetup groups. Yep. She's tried to communicate on Facebook. She's tried to connect with others. And I appreciate that even as she identifies why these don't work, I cannot tell you how proud I am that you are trying. The fact that you are knocking on those doors, that you are making the attempt is huge for me, because it hints at something deep inside of you. More powerful than your despair. More powerful than the overwhelming feeling of hopelessness. More powerful than the pessimism, and more powerful than the exhaustion is your own personal outrage and being pissed. Sometimes the kernel of change is this frustration of being sick and tired, of being sick and tired, and that is enough. That is the ember that sparks the fire, that becomes the change in your life, and I still see that in you, glowing and still trying, exhausted, taken aback, but it's still there. And so that gives me hope for you. Now, to the practical question that you're talking about with therapy, when we have a multi-headed problem, like thyroid, panic, personality, depression, honestly, it's usually a team approach. It's very rarely just going to be you come see me and I'm your one-stop shop, I'm the solution. it's usually going to take a team. It's usually going to take a physician. It's usually going to take me. It's usually going to take other aspects, nutrition, a million different things. And that's discouraging because you think, good Lord, that's like a puzzle. Where do I start? I get it. I get it. We start by doing the next right thing. We keep it as simple as we possibly can. And you have gone to therapy. You've tried that out. You found it to be both expensive and not helpful. Fair. Okay, fair. If that wasn't a good fit for you, you need to pivot. You need to find another therapist. And that's not to disparage the entire craft of therapy. I have plenty of evidence-based research that says this works. I don't need to make that case, right? That's already there. The books have been written. We have over 100 years of psychology and health science that tell us it does work. However, the individual that you're working with might not be the right fit for you. He might be the right fit for me. Like if I come in and I just need to vent, he might be the exact right fit for me. You sound like you need somebody more solution-focused. So different therapists are different ways. There's non-directive therapists and there's directive therapists. That's one of the big classifications of how we think. Non-directive therapists tend to be very passive and tend to allow you to guide the session, bring in your content, and then they'll kind of just like smoothly nudge things in different directions, trying to see what comes of that. Directive therapists are more hands-on. They tend to be annoyingly involved in your life. They tend to say, here's the thing I need you to do today. Here's the homework I want you to do. You better not come back to my office until you've X, Y, and Z. And that's different things. So I know for me, one thing that I often see in my private practice is people come in and go, after like 3 sessions, to me like, Jim, you're different than other therapists. And I usually expect that to be bad. Like this is usually what they're going to say before they sue me. But then they say, no. I mean, in a good way, I've been to other therapists before. I didn't feel like they were pushing me or making me do things. And when I meet a client, I usually like disclaim at the beginning, I'm very directive. If that's not what you're looking for, I'm the wrong fit. Like, well, let's get you to somebody who's not. But in my practice, we're doing it Jim's way. Like I am over dominating to the person and I tend to push them into things I want them to do. And that's not a good fit for probably 60% of the population, but there's 40 that need that. And when I hear you talking about therapy being the experience that you have, I'm immediately thinking about that, Nick, and just thinking, gosh, I'd like to see her maybe try it with somebody else. Again, not hoping that that one person is going to cure all 4 things, but that person can be part of the solution along with other things. But that ember has still got to be fanned into a flame.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I mean, there's I know a lot of therapists, and everybody just seems to have kind of their own little flavor, their own little take on things. I've had clients that came to me that really enjoyed working with me, and they didn't do well with other therapists. Yeah. And then I've had some that stopped seeing me and went to Jim or went to somebody else and then started doing a lot better. Right. And it
has nothing to do with the therapist. It has to do with the person.
Well, like, and it has to, it's just, it's a puzzle piece. You have to find one that fits. And I do agree. And I think one thing that might be helpful too is to take a look at what your expectations are. Looking for, as Jim said, kind of this panacea effect where there's going to be one thing that we're going to do and it's going to fix and cure everything. Start looking at this from the perspective of progress, not perfection. So going back again to like the medication. Well, before I even get to the medication, some of the other things that just looking at some of these individually, I'm a big believer in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world to talk about. And one of the things that we work on is what's called the CBT triangle. So it's the connection between emotions, behaviors, and thoughts. And a change in one of them fundamentally changes the other two. So you learn how to control your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors by just picking one and tweaking it a little bit, and the other two fall into place. But it sounds like you're not at that place. And that's one of the things that when I brought up the medication isn't going to be something that you take this pill and all of a sudden you feel great and you feel better. You're going to, like, all your problems are solved. That's not the expectation. The expectation is you find a medication that just bumps you up enough
1%
to start working on the CBT stuff.
Yes.
And then that bumps you up a little bit further to a point where you can start working on behavioral change.
Yes.
Like you can start getting more comfortable and pushing yourself into those environments. It'd be great to see you get to that point where you can say, I am afraid of going out and and going to this meetup group, and I'm afraid of having a panic attack. But I'm going to go anyway, and I'm going to give myself permission to have a panic attack at this meetup to prove to myself that even if I do that, I'm still going to be okay.
Yes. Incremental progress.
Incremental, yes.
Yeah.
But I really get the sense that a lot of people have this expectation that one thing is going to fix it. So if I tried the meds and that didn't fix it, then I scrap the meds and I try something else.
Yes.
That didn't fix it, I scrap that and I try something else.
Yes.
Look at this as a combination of things.
All of it. And each one of those is a puzzle piece that ultimately helps you. And the progress, not perfection piece is huge. And another note I want to add to this, Alpaca, is when you talk about, you said I tried therapy, but as far as I can tell, it's an expensive exercise and wasting my breath. Obviously, I've already addressed why I think that maybe that was a bad fit for you, but also another thought. Every letter and every word of every sentence of every paragraph in this letter that you wrote or that you dictated and somebody else wrote for you was not an exercise in wasted effort. It was an attempt. It was meaningful and expressive and incarnate. You summoned from non-existence into existence an accurate, honest, and authentic description of self. And even if we did that in person, it is not a waste. Even if you don't get the results today, you have no idea if that motion, that effort, that small attempt is part of the greater whole that is unforeseen in the future. How many missed shots has LeBron James taken in practice from the three-point line? I have no idea. But I know that every single one of them was absolutely necessary to make him the greatest basketball player of our generation.
I'm going to guess at least two.
At least two.
Well, it goes back to that Thomas Edison thing, right?
How many?
He didn't fail 2,000 times to build a light bulb. He learned 2,000 ways how not to build a light bulb.
Yes.
So with every attempt that didn't work, you've learned something.
That's right.
Right? You get further, you get closer to the answer with every failed attempt.
And I come at it also from an addiction standpoint. I remember working with somebody and we were doing a session and we had done a bunch and he said, I still feel like drinking and I feel like when's this going to go away and when is this going to work? And we were at the end of our hour and I looked at him and we'll call him Michael. I said, Michael, did you drink in the last hour? He said, well, no, dummy, I was with you. I was like, this is the best money you've ever spent. And it comes to that progress, not perfection, that even these missed shots, even things that are not today resulting in relief from these symptoms may be part of the greater whole. And you must do the next right thing. Even if you are walking blindly in a dark room with your hands out, if you are moving your feet, it matters, it's meaningful, and you are distancing yourself from where you were even 1 second ago. Do not stagnate. Do anything. And that is victory. In some small way, it is victory.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And and it sounds like you haven't given up on the meetup groups. Mm-hmm. And I would continue to pursue that as much as you possibly can. I think getting out there, getting active, being social can be very helpful towards addressing a lot of these problems.
Yeah, great question.
One other thing, too, I just want to also say, I'm surprised Jim didn't say it's his favorite thing to say. You had in here, you had said something about, makes me feel like I am a terrible mom and a wife. Terrible mom and a terrible wife. Mm-hmm. And I want to point out the thing that Jim always says all the time. Feelings are not facts.
Yeah.
So
true.
You can feel that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're a terrible mom. We all I feel like a terrible person sometimes, but I know I'm not.
Yeah.
Right? Feelings are not facts.
Yeah, and it is a fact, though. Nick is a terrible mom.
Well, that's coincidence.
That is true, though. That is a fact.
It doesn't take away from my point.
But Alpaca, I mean this with all my heart. You hang in there, okay? You do not give up on yourself, and if you can even take 1 inch of a step in a new direction, that is meaningful, and you have not wasted the energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for writing in.
Don't be a stranger.
Yep.
Let us know what's going on. We'd love to hear updates. Okay, we're going to take a short break. Is it possible to be too empathetic? We'll answer that question when we come back. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in anonymously and is asking about empathy. Is it possible to be too empathetic? I often feel guilt or sadness when I think of my loved ones' feelings being hurt, even if the reason they are hurting are beyond my control.
Yes.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet question and short and sweet answer. Is it possible to be too empathetic? Yes.